Buenos días y muchas gracias por su invitación. Es para mí un placer contar aquí la experiencia
Good morning, and
italiana
thank you very much for having
Ecobonus,
invited me to this
que es
meeting. It's a pleasure for
una
me to tell you
forma
about
para incentivar
the
de
Italian
forma pública
experience
la rehabilitación
of
energética y
Ecobonus,
alcanzar así los objetivos
which is a
de
way that we have used
eficiencia
to
energética
incentivate from
que
the public
supone una
sphere
lucha contra el cambio
energy
climático.
refurbishment, and as a result,
Ok,
to be able to
leo
achieve
brevemente
energy
los
efficiency
plazos de
goals that are
rehabilitación en Italia.
imposed by
Es un
the
año muy
fight
emotivo
against climate
y
change. All right,
varias
I would
partes
firstly like to
sucedió
say a couple of
antes
words
de
about
que
existing housing stock in
fueran
Spain.
publicadas las
It's very
primeras
old, and
regulaciones
most of
sobre
it was
edificios
built
resistentes
before
y sobre eficiencia energética,
the
que
first
como veis empezaron a entrar
regulations
en el año
on
71,
seismic
pero solo
resistant
una pequeña parte de
buildings
las que
and
estaban
energy efficiency were
habían
enforced.
sido
As you can
respetando
see,
estas
they
normas
were
por decretos
enforced for the first time in
con lo cual estamos
1971, but
hablando
only a
de un
very
año
small part
obsoleto
of the existing housing stock
que
has been built,
necesita
taking
una
into account these
rehabilitación
regulations.
profunda.
So we're talking about an obsolete housing stock
Evidentemente, hablando de
that
Italia,
requires
tenemos un grandísimo
deep
problema de déficit
restoration.
hídrico, que en Italia es muy elevado.
Of
Es un
course, when
plan
you
del
talk about
que
Italy, you have to talk about the
todos sabemos,
serious
que hemos
problem of
tenido en los
seismic
políticos
risk, which
desde
is
mucho
very
tiempo.
high in Italy. And I think
Ese
that you
riesgo
can
corresponde a la
see the
necesidad
earthquakes that
de
we've suffered between
para
2012
tener
and
una idea de la gravedad
2017
de
on the
la
map. The
grandes
size of the
que
circle
hemos identificado
corresponds
dentro de
to
Italia.
the intensity of the earthquake. So this gives you an idea of
Las
how severe the
normas
situation is in our
resistentes
country. So if we
especificadas
consider that
deben
most
hacer
of
una
our
idea de
housing
qué
stock was
significan
built
las
before
cantidades de
the
daño
first regulations
después
on
de
seismic
cada
resistance were
terremoto.
enforced, you can have an idea of why
Ok,
we have so
tenemos pero
much
ahora realmente una
damages
gran problemática.
after an earthquake
En el Plan Nacional
happens.
Integrado de Energía y Clima, que todos los países
And
de la
we
Unión
finally have a
Europea han
wonderful
tenido
opportunity
que
ahead of us
empezar a
in
someter
the
a
National Energy and Climate
el objetivo de
Integrated
alcanzar
Plan,
los
which
objetivos
all
de
EU member countries
2030
have had to submit to
en la de la
Brussels
decarbonización de
with
nuestros
the aim of achieving
mercados,
together by
creo que
2050
Italia confía
the
mucho
full
en el
decarbonisation of our
fuerte
built
ahorro
housing
energético
stock
de
and
su
real estate
patrimonio
estate.
residencial.
We see
Como veis,
that Italy
sobre
is
una tercera
convinced in
parte
achieving
del ahorro
energy
energético
savings in
que tenemos que
residential
alcanzar en
housing stock.
2030, una tercera parte
So, as you can
procede
see, nearly one
que ya
third of
de la
energy saving that we
rehabilitación
have to
energética profunda
achieve
del
by
patrimonio residencial.
2030
Esto es un
is foreseen that
objetivo
will
político muy
take
claro,
place
una
by
visión
means of deep
suficientemente a largo plazo
renovation
y
of
evidentemente hay
housing
que
stock.
buscar
This is a very clear political objective
los
with a
instrumentos
clear long term vision to it.
para
And of
conseguirlo.
course, we need to
Necesitamos
find
entonces muchas
those
experiencias como
tools
estas. Esta es una
available to
rehabilitación
achieve this goal.
de una comunidad de
So
propietarios
we
en
need
edificios como hay
many experiences
centenares
like
de
these.
miles en Italia,
This
pero en
is
Europa
the
también.
renovation of
Esta
building
organización de la
of an owners
propiedad, la de la
association, and there are
responsabilidad de
hundreds
los
of thousands
propietarios,
of these
quizás más
in
importante
Italy
que
as
las
well as
más
in the rest of Europe.
comunes.
And this
En Italia, en España, en
organization
Francia y en los
of
países del este
residential
europeo,
blocks are
especialmente en los
probably
países del norte.
typical
Y
and common in Italy, Spain,
necesitamos
France, and
barreras,
Eastern
barreras
European
para
countries,
los propietarios
but less prevalent in
residenciales
northern
estructurales.
European countries.
Seguramente hablamos de
And
barreras
they
financieras,
already have
pero
specific
también
barriers
tenemos
when it
otros
comes
problemas.
to total
¿Cómo
structural and
podemos
energy renovation
financiar la
works. We're
rehabilitación
talking
de
about
esa,
financial barriers,
todo este
and
inmenso
this is
patrimonio
usually the first
certificado?
problem we
También
encounter. You
barreras
ask yourself how
ligadas
we're
a
going to
cuántos
fund
recursos
the total
adicionales
renovation of
y
this
a la dificultad
huge,
que todos
complicated
los propietarios se pongan de
housing
acuerdo
stock, and then barriers
sobre
to the process,
cómo
the
rehabilitar
decision-making
y
process,
cómo
and the
proceder
added
para
difficulty that
conseguir
you need all owners to agree on how the renovation
el
process will
proyecto
take place and
energético
the money that will be
realizado
spent
durante
for
un
that
proyecto europeo
purpose.
financiado por la Unión Europea, Sharing Cities,
This particular
un
project was
proyecto
carried
realizado
out
en muchas más
under the sponsorship of an European project called Sharing Cities and funded by it, and it was focused in the broadest concept and scope of the term smart cities. But of course, when we talk about smart cities, we are also talking about the importance that is given to the deep renovation of buildings and how they are adapted to the concept of smartness. And the new directive of building efficiency of cities is also taken into account, as well as the concept of smart readiness. So in Italy, we have a long-standing tradition of supporting both financially and economically the different renovation projects in general, and more specifically energy renovation by means of tax rebates. This incentive began in 1986 as a measure to fight against the underground economy, and it's very simple. As a concept, the owner of a house, an apartment, carries out renovation works and spends a specific amount on it. Let's imagine that this person has spent 100 euros, and in the 10 following years, every year, this person can recover by means of fiscal rebate or tax rebate a part of this investment. When we're talking about general renovation works, like, for example, renovating a bathroom or adding an extra room or an extension to a home, the owner will be able to get back 50% of costs. This, of course, has lots of advantages. First of all, it avoids tax evasion, and we clearly saw this in the construction industry, where tax evasion has disappeared practically completely. It's very easy from the point of view of bureaucratic management and proceedings, and it's also a very important topic because it is not only an incentive to renovation, but it is not accounted for in the public debt of the country according to Eurostat figures. And also every year, these tax rebates are confirmed because there are studies that have been carried out by the lower house in Italy showing that it produces more income, but it costs money to the government. But of course, it's got disadvantages because families that have lower incomes may not be able to get this tax back because they're not paying taxes, and also the time of recovery is much longer because we're talking about a 10-year period. Despite these limitations, it has been a very successful scheme. And now we have different types of tax rebates that can be applied depending on the type of work that we carry out. We're not only talking about your average renovation project, but energy renovation, seismic resistant renovation, and we're even talking about better conditions for homeowners associations than for single homes. The regulations have been published as strategies for recovery to overcome the economic crisis of the pandemic, and it is the so-called super bonus program, where tax rebates can be up to 110% of the cost of the renovation works and are recovered in a 5-year term. Another novelty is that this tax rebate may also be used directly to pay the company who is carrying out the renovation works. And this is an actual example. We have a housing block that has a very ambitious project for seismic resistant and deep energy renovation. The cost is 42,000 euros per flat. We're talking about a block with 40 different housing units, and the Homeowners Association has 3 possibilities. They can decide to pay the amount they owe, So each one of the owners will receive 9,240 euros rebate in their income tax declaration for 5 years, or they can always pay 100% to the company and then give or cede this fiscal credit to the bank, which will monetize it very, very soon, covering the cost of the financial operation. The alternative of this is for the homeowners association to ask the company to advance this amount as a discount. And this type of work would have a maximum of 42,000 euros per housing unit, and therefore the homeowners association would have to pay 2,000 euros per housing unit to carry out these works, and afterwards the company would be in charge of getting back this money as a tax rebate. So this is more or less how the system very simply works. So you have the homeowners association ask the executing company to do something, and then they work with the bank that funds the operation. Once the works are over, then they submit all the necessary papers to the ENEA, which is the National Energy Association, which is in charge of the technicalities, and then submits the certification of these clients to the tax authorities, and the homeowners association declares that they want to use this tax credit to pay the company, and the company can later on use it. This scheme has been recently implemented, and the latest regulations were enforced on August 8th. So we're all waiting to see what's going to happen and whether this is going to lead to many deep renovation projects or not. It is clear that to have access to this incentive, the projects have to be ambitious in scope, even though not as much as we wanted them to be initially. To conclude, I'd like to say that the financial barrier to energy renovation is completely overcome. We have an important market developing thanks to Ecobonus, but we believe that increasing it to 100% in 5 years, it will grow even more. We already have very good results in energy efficiency, but they have to improve much more, like we said before. And this mechanism for credit cession should actually increase all these types of projects. And of course, in the residential area, there is still a lot of cultural and social resistance against these types of works, and this is precisely what we have to overcome. I'd like to thank you for your attention, and I am available for any question you may want to ask. Thank you very much for your attention.